I don't blood for you.
Okay, Erev Tov. So, looking ahead to Rosh Hashanah, we've been talking about a hot shofar. Spoke the last few nights about the minimum amount of shofar blasts that you can have. What about the maximum amount? Somebody asked me earlier this week. So, what about Baal Tosef? Right, we spoke about how we know from the Torah. The Torah said you have to have 9 tkiyot. From 9 tkiyot, we're not sure. We have to safek. We get to 30 tkiyot. Okay, yesterday we were discussing. Okay, it's a person in hospital, 9 or 30, whatever it is. But we don't just do a 30. We don't make do with that. We go up to 60. You have the extra ones in the Amidah. Certain places where they have a minhag where they do in the Tfilat Halachash as well. We get up to 100, 101. Right? There are those places where 101 is also not good enough. I remember in the yeshiva. So there are different opinions in the Rishonim, as you'll know, as to how long the tkiyot have to be. Right? Rashi has a very interesting opinion over there without getting into the technicalities, but the tkiyot for Rashi are much, much shorter than they are for the other Rishonim. And essentially, if you blow the tkiyah in such a way that you fulfill the mitzvah according to those Rishonim, you cannot fulfill according to Rashi and vice versa. So in the yeshiva, at the end of the 101, at the end of Musaf, they used to blow extra tkiyot, right? There are places that do that, and they go home and do more, whatever. So the question was raised, right? What about Baal Tosef? We have a principle, we have a command in the Torah, we find it twice, Parshat Veit Chanan and Parshat Re'eh, where the Torah tells us, don't add, lo tosifu, you're going to add on mitzvot. And yeah, we're just adding and adding. The truth is, it seems that when it comes to Tkiyat Shofar, there seems to be something intrinsic about adding on, about doing more than we're actually supposed to. The Gemara, it's quite well known in the Gemara Rosh Hashanah, says, why do we blow the shofar in the first place? Right? The Gemara says on Rosh Hashanah, Daf Tetzayin, I think, and so it says, Lama Tokim Rosh Hashanah, and immediately the Gemara recoils at that question. What do you mean? Lama Tokim, Rahman Amatiku. What do you mean, why do we blow the shofar? The Torah said, blow the shofar. So actually, it didn't say blow the shofar. It doesn't say anywhere directly in the context of Rosh Hashanah the word shofar. We learn it out from the Yovel and Zerah Shabbat, etc. But in any event, Gemara says, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about why do you have the tkiyah and the truah? So it says Yom Truah, okay. And then it says, no, that's not the question. The question is, why do we have the tkiyot mu'umad and the tkiyot miyushav? Right? If you're Sephardi, it's always easier to remember which is the tkiyot miyushav and tkiyot mu'umad, because we actually sit for the tkiyot miyushav. Our minhag is we stand for everything. So the sitting tkiyot we stand for, and the standing tkiyot we stand for. But nonetheless, just begs the question. So why do we have 2 sets of tkiyot? Why do we blow before Musaf, go back and blow again during Musaf? And the answer is, la'abev ha-satan. In order to confuse the Satan. Who's the Satan? What's the Satan? Why does he get confused? Okay, so there are many, many drashas that are given about that. But Rashi says, most famous one, probably what Tosfot says, talks about, we won't get into it now, it's a bit confusing. But Rashi says as follows. He says, what does it mean, la'abev ha-satan? He says, it's the fact that Israel mechabavim et mitzvot, since the mitzvot are precious to us, so we don't just check the box, we don't just do what we have to do, we go above and beyond. The Torah said, go 9, so we'll say we're not going to do 9, we're going to do 100. Right? That essentially is what gives us the extra merit on the day of judgment. The fact that we don't just make do with what we have to, we go above and beyond. So again, the question is, it's all very nice, you want to go ma'alu me'ever, but if the Torah told you don't add in, don't do extra, so you're doing extra is not. There's nothing good about that. So why are we allowed to? So there are, I think, 3 primary explanations as to why the extra blast of the shofar does not fit into this category of Baal Tosef, of doing extra mitzvot, which we are not allowed to do. So the first one appears in Tosfot. There's a number of places Tosfot discusses in Rosh Hashanah. He says like this: when we have a prohibition of Baal Tosef means that you have a certain mitzvah, and there are parameters and definitions and ways in which the mitzvah has to be done, and you decide that you're going to add in. The Torah said you need tzitzit on a 4 corner, you need 4 sets of tzitzit on a garment, you're going to add 5. This is meant to be 4 parashot in tefillin, you're going to take 5. Right? You have 4 minim with the arba minim. You don't want arba minim, you want chamesh minim, right? You're going to add in extra. That's Baal Tosef. You're taking the mitzvah and you are adding to it, you're changing it. But if you just take a mitzvah and you fulfill it the way the Torah told you to fulfill it, you just do it more than once, you do it extra times, so that's not Baal Tosef. On Seder night, right, how much matzah does a person have to eat? A kazayit. So a person decides, I'm going to eat 2 kazayit, 3 kazayit, 4 kazayits. We never heard of that's Baal Tosif. You're just fulfilling the mitzvah again and again with the intention. This is all for the mitzvah. Or a person takes the lulav, carries the lulav around the whole day on Sukkot. That's fine. So therefore, says Tosfot, okay, so you fulfill the mitzvah of shofar the way that it's meant to be. You're meant to blow the shofar. You fulfill it. You blow it again, or as a way to fulfill the mitzvah. He says that that should not be a problem. That's not Baal Tosif. So says Tosfot. That is approach number one. Approach number two, and it's interesting then to try and think why these Rishonim don't agree with each other. Why, if the approach is good enough for Tosfot, why is it not good enough for the Rashba? The Rashba says, why is it not? He says, when is there a problem of Baal Tosif? It's a problem when not an individual. When an individual comes along, right? When I say I'm going to add on an extra mitzvah, says the Rashba, that's a problem. But if Chazal came along, and Rosh Hashanah is not the only example where Chazal gave us extra decrees or gave us extra parameters or different ways to fulfill the mitzvah, the Beit Din came along and made a takana that said originally you had to hear 9 blasts, 30 blasts. Okay, now we say you have to hear more. You have to hear 60 or 100, and we'll see the difference between them. So all we're doing is we're following Chazal. That's not Baal Tosif. That's not a problem. So Tosfot says, I don't consider this to be Baal Tosif. I don't consider it to be adding because you're just fulfilling the mitzvah again. You're just repeating the same action. Rashba says, no, I don't consider it to be Baal Tosif. Why? Because you as an individual are not deciding that you have to blow the shofar extra times, but because Chazal told you to blow it extra times. The Gemara said, and therefore there is not. So there are those that what's the difference between Rashba and Tosfot here? Why do they offer these two separate explanations? So there are those who said that maybe this machloket between Tosfot and the Rashba actually mirrors a machloket between the Rambam and the Ravid in terms of what the definition of Baal Tosif is. Okay, listen to how the Rambam writes, for example. The Rambam here in Hilchot Mamrim, second parak, says the following. He says, he said, we have a problem, conceptually, fundamentally, a problem with this idea of Baal Tosif. But we know, at the very beginning of Pirkei Avot, Asur Siag LaTorah, the Sanhedrin, the Chachamim, are given the responsibility, given the ability to add things to the Torah, to add in safeguards, to say certain things which were permitted, to make them forbidden. You have Muktzah on Shabbos, you have hundreds of examples. Okay, so how can it be that on the one hand, the sages have that authority, but on the other hand, we say, so essentially the Torah is saying, you the sages have to add, but don't add. So how does it work together? So he says, he says, he says the Rambam, there's no problem for the Chachamim to come along and to add things on, as long as that's clear that is a din d'Rabbanan. Then that's fine. But if the Chachamim were to come along and add on a din and say, this is a din d'oraita, that would be a problem of Baal Tosif. Right? So he gives a whole example, with basar b'chalav. Basar b'chalav, we know that from the Torah, chicken, for example, is not actually considered meat. Right? Practically speaking, it is, and that's why unless you, Rabbi Yossi Aglili had a different opinion, but we hold that chicken is meat d'Rabbanan. So if you were to come along and say that chicken is considered meat d'oraita, says Rambam, no, that would be a problem of Baal Tosif. But they don't say that. They say it's rabbinic law, and that's fine. The Ravid, on the other hand, says no. He says it's not just it's not so simple that the Beit Din comes along and they have to add things on. Right? He says that. Sorry, the Ravid actually says the opposite. He says so long for the Beit Din, it wouldn't really be an issue. When tomorrow it says Baal Tosif, Torah says Baal Tosif, it's talking about for individuals. So you might say that that's exactly what the Rashba said, and the Rashba is like the Ravid, and the Tosfot over here is like Rambam. Okay, that might be other ways to explain it, but that is one direction which the poskim point out. There is something very interesting which Rav Chaim says, that in terms of it's not so clear. We have these two sets of tkiyot. And where was it established? When did the Chachamim come and say, you have to blow these two sets of tkiyot? Rav Chaim says listen to what the Rambam says very, very carefully. And he says what comes out of this is actually something different to what we might have expected. The main set of tkiyot that we have on Rosh Hashanah is when? Is the tkiyot de me'umad. Not the tkiyot that we begin with when we say the bracha and we have the tkiyot before Musaf, but it's during Musaf, during the repetition, because we have the three brachot of Malchiot, Zichronot, and Shofrot. When we blow the shofar with each of those brachot, that is the main fulfillment of the mitzvah of Tkiyat Shofar. And we make sure that we have all the different sets. We have Tashrat, Tarat by each bracha, and therefore that's our set of 30. So the Rambam writes is that Tzibur Kayavin Lishma Tkiyot Aseret Brachot. That's the chiyuv. That's the obligation. You have to hear these tkiyot according to the brachot. Ketzad, and he explains. We say the different brachot. We get to Malchiot Tokev Shalosh, Zichronot Tokev Shalosh, Shofrot Tokev Shalosh. Okay. A couple of halachot later, the Rambam says something very interesting. He says, "Aminag pashut," and pashut. When the Rambam says minhag pashut, doesn't mean the simple minhag. It means that which is nitpashet, that which is prevalent, right? Which is spread to all the different communities. This is the prevalent practice when regarding a tkiyot shofar. And he blows the shofar, etc. Okay, so there he's talking, and then later on, after the shaliach tzibur finishes the brachot, then you blow again. So very interesting. Listen, so Rav Chaim says like this: when the Rambam is talking about just the tkiyot me'umad with the brachot, there he says chayavin. There he says it's an obligation. When he talks about the fact that we have the tkiyot, the miyushav, the first set before musaf, in addition to that later set, he doesn't say they're chayav. He says, haga pashut. This is the practice. This is something that developed over time. This is something that developed by the people. Why do we do that? Why? Right? We're going to fulfill the mitzvah through the Chazarat HaShatz. Why do we have to blow shofar before? So that's what the Gemara said, Kadei la'beva satan, whatever that means. So what comes out, according to this, is that the question on Baal Tosef, the question of the extra blast, is not actually a question on the second set of the second 30. It's actually a question on the first 30. And according to this, you can't give the Rashba's explanation that it was established by the Beit Din, because it wasn't established by the Beit Din. It was a minhag that came later, and that is how he sees it. Okay, one more explanation that comes out of this, and this can be found. So Rav talks about this. You can see this in the Ramban and in the Ritzvah. There's echoes of this idea, which is the following: that once we have fulfilled, even though the main fulfillment, we said the main tkiyot are the ones in the Chazarat HaShatz, in Musaf, but once we've blown the 30 shofar blasts at the beginning of tkiyot Miyushav before Musaf, so we fulfilled the mitzvah. You've heard the 30, you fulfilled the mitzvah. It's a better way to fulfill. We want to hear with the brachot as well. Fine. And again, as I've mentioned a few times over the last few weeks, in many of the Rishonim, you don't do the full set by each bracha. But that's our custom now. In many of the Rishonim, they did not do the full set. And the question was, why? How can that be? So there is an idea which says as follows, that part of the tefillah, the Gemara says, when the Gemara talks about Malchiot and Zichronot, and it says, Bameh, how are you going to do this? How will you make Hashem king? How will you make your memories come up before me? Bameh b'shofar, through the shofar, i.e. the shofar is assisting through our brachot, it's assisting our tefillah. And it might be an idea that over there, when I blow the shofar in the Chazarat HaShatz, that's not to fulfill the mitzvah of Tkiyat Shofar, strictly speaking, because that we've already fulfilled. But that is part of the tefillah. So it's a completely different purpose. So based on that, we could suggest as well, you're not adding on anything. You're fulfilling the mitzvah in the first place. You're doing the 30 blasts. That's for Tkiyat Shofar. Afterwards, you come and you're blowing again, but that's a completely different purpose. That is part of tefillah. That is something that goes up as well. So those are a few of the different explanations as to why there is no problem to the extra shofar blast. Rabbi Kenigsberg Mincha Maariv Shiur Sept.